It was all the doctors were there, the whole team, and I'm talking, I'm trying to make jokes, and then all of a sudden, like, the world just started closing in, and I guess I started when I watched the tape back, I start mumbling a little bit, and that's when they. But we did that pilot episode for PBS. They did not pick it up, and at Popular Science, they said, okay, a swing and a miss, and they moved on to other things. But in my head, I'm like, that's what I should be doing. I should be in front of the camera. I should be doing something more creative than sitting here working on ledgers and balance sheets. And so they had brought in a producer from the BBC to look at all their footage and everything they did for the pilot to see if there's anything they could do to make it better and sellable. And this was this is probably over 6 months where I was still churning all this stuff in my head. And I finally saw this 3-page report from this BBC producer who said, the production quality isn't really there. She had nothing but negative things to say. But in the second page, there was this amazing paragraph that said, but the highlight of the pilot was that host you had. That gentleman, was a natural on camera. Wherever you found that diamond in the rough, that is what. And it was nothing but nice things about me. I was like, ooh, let me read that again. And I called her, and we actually met for lunch a couple of times because I'm like, oh, somebody who spotted the diamond in the rough. This is somebody I need to be friends with. And I think on our third or fourth lunch, she just looked at me and said, look at you. You're hunched over. You're cranky all the time. You're miserable at your job, and you just keep looking for a way out. You have a way out. Just leave and start doing something creative. Which sounded crazy. Your eyes are bulging now. And I'm like, that's just crazy. And I went home that night and said, talked to my wife about that meeting. And I got to that point where I said, she thinks I should just quit my job and put all in on the creative side. And she thought for a second, and she looked at me and she said, I think you should too. I was like, what? Everybody's lost their mind. But over the course of the next week, we kept talking it out. And that's what we did. There was no plan. There was no, I'm going to get a job here. I literally went in, gave my notice. A month later was Monday morning, and I was sitting at this very desk going, now what? But again, baby steps. Somebody had a friend at a film festival in LA. I went out to LA for a month to work on a film festival doing menial labor. Made a bunch of contacts. So I would keep going out to LA. So that when I finally worked on Damages and met Brett Cullen, I would go out to LA. So I just kept networking as much as I could, kept writing, and I don't, there was no one big step. This is how I got there. 2 years later, I'm sitting on the set of Scrubs talking to them about a spec script. I'm in just things happen at odd times just because you keep swinging. And I still have no plan. It's been, it's been 16 years. I still have no plan. And I can't say, oh, of course, it was a raging success. It's been a good run. But the best thing that's happened in the 16 years of not being a corporate guy, that I was able to stay home and raise my 2 sons. So I'm always here. So there was a 5 or 6 year span there where there wasn't as much creativity, but I was with my guys every single moment of their early years. So that was a fantastic benefit that I would have never seen back in 2004.
That is definitely. You got one shot to see them grow up.
Yeah. And now they're ready to just get rid of me. So
are they showing any interest in the creative world?
No, the older guy, no. The little guy, every time I set up my green screen to do a web series or some kind of comedy video, anytime the green screen is up, he wants to make a movie. So we have a lot of movies where he's a time traveler, and sometimes he shrinks me, sometimes I shrink him. Any silly special effects I could do with iMovie, he's a big fan of. But I don't know if that's going to... I'll try and dissuade him from pursuing this as a business.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe that's where he's going to go. You never know.
Hey, but if he wants to do it, at least I can be honest with him about what it entails. Because I really thought I was going to be working on a sitcom, and then within a year, I'd be noticed as, hey, you're pretty funny. Why don't you jump in a scene? I thought I was going to be on King of Queens, as third build neighbor next door. That didn't work.
Different paths.
Different path.
A different path you had to carve. On a backpedal to It's About Time.
Yes.
Now, writing your own one-man show, did you have any idea what that would look like or sound like, or you just started writing?
I was trying to pull out the best parts of the memoir, and then Richard Klein from Three's Company, who was my he was my acting teacher. Then I started running classes for him, and we just became golfing buddies after that. He kind of helped me massage the good stories out of the book, and then it all came from Rob Long, who was on Cheers, like I said, who said the timing thing is great. So I kind of merged those two ideas about how timing was an issue in those that first decade of my work life, and we just kept massaging it. It was good, and I got into what's it called, Solo Fest, the largest independent, largest one-man show festival in the world here in Manhattan. So they literally take over multi-stage place on 42nd Street and produce, I don't even know how many shows, maybe 50, 100 one-man shows throughout the 2-month thing. So we workshopped it a little bit. I did that festival, and we came home with Best Comedy Script, which was a nice little feather in the cap. And that got me an agent back then, because I was between representation that did well getting me an agent, and the Best Comedy credit has gotten me some other meetings. So everything kind of helps you.
So that was the award you won for it.
Yes. That was award-winning one-man show. I like to keep saying that in my FM voice.
It's on the website, award-winning one-man show. Was it just performed at this workshop, or was it actually performed a few for like a? Did it have a run? I should say.
They accepted the script in January, and then I did a whole run for like a month in April because I wanted to fine-tune it and just see what didn't work in a separate theater. Then we had a bunch of performances as part of the festival that fall.
Now, doing the show, do you think it was kind of a, I hate to use the word healing process, but maybe was it a way of like dealing with all the stuff you had to do in the corporate world, actually saying these, doing the lines and going through all that? Did it?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that cathartic. The toughest part, I think, was because I came from improv and stand-up. Richie noticed it right away. Like, I roam the stage because that's what you do. You have a microphone, and especially in improv, like the whole stage is your play set. But for this was like my first legit, it was a piece, a performance piece. And I had to find that stillness. He's like, you just stand there and talk. It'll be so much better than if you're always moving. So he really had to calm me down. And we did all the blocking, but it was more about just being centered. So there was more of an internal thing that was going on, where it wasn't a cathartic emotional experience, but it was a learning experience on the performance side, if that makes sense.
Yes. So you're learning about the process, learning how to.
Yeah, because I hadn't done. I wasn't a theater kid. My live performances were stand up and improv, where there's no, anything goes. You can take off on any tangent. I did one off-Broadway show, which was a little before that, about 9/11, which is super serious and dark, and so it's kind of, I was never that kid that said, "Oh, I'm going to be a star." I just kind of keep falling into things, so it works out pretty well.
So you're okay with doing something dramatic?
Yeah, I mean, I was always shocked. I came up as, funny guy, improv guy, comedy guy, and when I started acting, I was always, the prison doctor, or the morgue doctor, or the attorney. I was always super serious, and it took me a while. As an actor, you don't know who you are. I have a big voice. And I'm 6'3", and I look good in a suit. That's, I never thought that, but when you start going to audition after audition, especially since I was doing that while I was working in the corporate world, I would go to those auditions looking like a businessman. And when you see actors dressed as businessmen, you can really stand out, because it's the guys who live like I do now in cargo shorts and ratty t-shirts. When they try to put on that suit for one audition that they haven't put on in 6 months, all of a sudden I stand out like a beacon.
You already had the role.
Yeah, I in my head I did. I didn't always work out that way.
Keep plugging away.
Keep plugging away.
What was the Belanger Experiment?
That was, I mean, I've been doing podcasting now. It's got to be 10 years, but I kind of fell into it by accident because I was writing for Men's Health at the time, Men's Health magazine, huge audience. The guy I mentioned before, who worked at Popular Science, the editor who left me abandoned with all our screenwriting dreams, he ended up at Men's Health, and at one point just wrote me and said, "Hey, why don't you come and write a column for us?" So I was writing a weekly column for their website, The Married Life. Mm-hmm. It was about just, 500 words a week about my in-laws, and at the time we were expecting, I had a baby at home, we were expecting another one, so it was just all that kind of stuff, which, it did pretty well for them. And so I pitched them the Belanger Experiment, which was going to be a video web series where I would go do different things, which is kind of like I was going to do a Popular Science, which was going to be more science related. I pitched this as, I'm going to go out in one day, stay at one golf hole and try and make a hole in one. I'm going to take as many shots as I can until that ball goes in the hole. Or one of the ones I did was I played goalie against a lacrosse team. And I never played lacrosse in my life. So I found a college team here, like the number 4 team in the nation, to play goalie against, and they almost broke my arm. I played ping pong against a world champion, an Olympic table tennis player. I did not do well. I retook the SATs, which I did not do well at. So it was a weekly. It was supposed to be weekly. We were going to do every week a series of stuff like that. I played golf against Gary Player. We were going to do fun adventures like that. So but while I was doing that, the person who was doing the Men's Health podcast went to do another job, and nobody at the magazine, for some reason, podcasts were still not there yet, and they didn't know what to do with it. And they said, "Oh, Steve likes to talk. Steve, why don't you come down and host our podcast?" Okay. You know what? I knew because I was a big fan of Ricky Gervais's podcast, which was like the first one I'd ever heard of. I don't even know how I got it, dude. Like, somehow I would get it onto my iPod Shuffle and listen to it while I was running. And it was the funniest thing ever. And then I started branching out. They were hard to get when it started. It wasn't easy. But that's where they called me down to talk about Bob Guccione. So that's how I had actually first met their host. And then when their host left, they brought me in. And the first few were horrible, dude. Like, I would go down to their office in Pennsylvania and just talk to editors at Men's Health about what was in that month's magazine. I'm like, no, this is not easy. I don't. How about? I said, I had done something that week. I did a book promotion video with Adam Carolla and talked to him and his people. And I said, oh, you know what? I just worked with Carolla, and I'm going out to LA next week. If I can get him to do an interview, how about we put that on the podcast? They said, oh yeah, you want to do that? That's fine. And then when I got back, I got one of the Islanders to do the show, and they Men's Health guys just put him up. And then like a week later, they said, we listened to both shows. You're good at talking to these guys. If anybody you want to interview, just let us know. If we approve it, you can do it. I just started going out to everybody. And once I had like Carolla, I had known Todd Glass, a couple of comedians like that. It started getting easier and easier, especially with Men's Health behind me. It was easier and easier to get guests. I mean, I got Danica Patrick, Adrian Peterson, Gary Player, Graham McDowell, Emmett Smith, just anybody in the sports world, Joe Namath, Barry Sanders, like all these big names, I would just go sit down and talk with.
Now, you had to go to them, or were they coming to you, or was it through remote?
No, I would never do. They would always try to pitch a phone call. I put my foot down because I'm,